Hello and welcome to the September 14th bug triage meeting for Operator SDK. Just going to go down the list. Oh, and actually before we begin, there's one thing I'd like to mention. I sent out both in the Slack channel and the Doodle poll, both in the Slack channel and the mailing list, a link to a Doodle poll about scheduling a recurring meeting for grooming the backlog once every release cycle. So if everybody could take a look at that, respond to it so we could choose a good meeting time, that would be great. Okay, starting off at the top. Custom scorecard tests has been tested just with Go. Camilla, this is your thing?
Yeah, it's my thing. Okay, this is a feature that was added to scorecard. We added the test for the Go projects, but we didn't add a test for Ansible in the Helm to ensure the feature works well with them as well. So to be just to supplement the integration tests with that.
So just to clarify, you mean currently we only test scorecard by pushing a Go operator and running scorecard, and you want to add tests that push an Ansible operator and run scorecard tests against that, and the same for Helm operator?
Scorecard has few features. This is one of the features that was added. It's a image test with 2 custom tests. So the idea of this task is add a new test for the integration test for Ansible Indigo to check the custom tests as well and this image.
Hey Camilla, I'm wondering, so my understanding is that the custom tests are just examples that we wrote to basically demonstrate how someone else could write their own scorecard test. So really what I think we probably should be doing is, I don't think we need to run the custom tests for every operator type, because the operator type tests are testing more the operator itself and not necessarily the other tooling around the operator. So I think like the fact that we have scorecard running against Helm, Ansible, and Go is like probably all we need. And what we probably want to do for the scorecard test is maybe we would just want to have some unit tests, or maybe we just need to run it with just one operator type if we needed it to have an operator. But I would probably talk with Jeff McCormick on this one to see what he thinks about how he thinks we should test it. But it doesn't seem like we need to test this with all the operator types.
Yeah, all your points is very valid, and my understanding is the same. It's just test is just an example. However, it's the custom test it's an example for a feature that is provided by the scorecard. So if we don't add in the integration tests, okay, we can ensure with unit tests, this would be an option, but we would not do the test with the image. So if we don't add in them, could not we do some change and break? How you can ensure that it works for no-go operators as well, you know? This is the point.
I guess I'm not totally sure. I think in my mind, the EDE tests for Go, Ansible, Helm are testing functionality of Go, Ansible, and Helm. And the custom scorecard test is just a separate side example that really doesn't have a whole lot to do with operator types at all, is my understanding. So I think what I'm saying is, yes, we probably need a test for the custom scorecard tests. No, I don't think we need it to be repeated for each operator type. So maybe we have a 4th test file. Maybe this goes in the integration test that we have, or maybe we have yet another separate thing that just tests that our custom scorecard test, which again is just an example. No one's actually meant to be using this. It's really just code examples.
So if I can get some clarification, because I'm not 100% clear on how scorecard works. When you say custom scorecard test, this is a way for you to write your own test that tests presumably some functionality of your operator. For instance, if I was writing my SQL operator, I might write a custom scorecard test that like actually attempts to log in to I deploy one and actually try and log in and write data and then read data, that sort of thing.
Yep, exactly.
So a custom scorecard test, I agree, isn't really like the fact that we probably want to have a test that tests the capability to run a custom scorecard test, but I agree that, testing that functionality against Go, against Helm, against Ansible probably isn't needed.
Yeah, I agree.
Is there anything functionally different between a custom scorecard test and the scorecard tests that are provided? Because we are testing some scorecard tests.
I think the problem here is that for the scorecard tests that we're running in our end-to-end tests, we're making sure that the scorecard tests work with each operator type, but we're not trying to flip that on its head where we are asserting that a particular if the scorecard is working as intended, you know what I mean? So like if the scorecard can't run custom tests, then that's a problem, but that's not going to be affected by what operator type it's running with.
It depends to know if it is not affected or not, because they have different configurations. So I doesn't know exactly.
They don't.
For example, we generate the bundle, we check the manifests, and we have small changes.
Yeah, but we're not writing the custom tests. That's somebody else, right? So we don't know what the tests are going to be. Therefore, we only can check if scorecard can actually run any custom test, and that's all we care about. For the built-in test types, we do care that they work with Ansible, Helm, and Go because the bundles can be different.
I think the way that I would break this down, and I agree with what you're saying, Eric, I think what I would say is when we're running the EDE test for Go, Ansible, and Helm, we're testing that the scaffolding for Go, Ansible, and Helm plugins works as expected. And part of that means running the default scaffolded scorecard config that gets scaffolded by those plugins. There's a separate set of tests that says that we want to test scorecard. And one of the things we want to do when we test scorecard, outside of any particular operator type, is we want to make sure that we can run a custom test, not just our built-in tests. So I think the idea behind the custom scorecard testing, custom scorecard testing, is that we should run it as part of our overall scorecard subcommand tests, not as part of our operator EDE tests.
My idea of the future in long term about this stuff would be the tests of each type would be in the repository of each type, and you would check the project, if the project was scaffolded, if the project run, but not to check the tool features. The tool features would be in the repository of the tool features for, and then we would put integration tests to ensure them with the types, do you know?
Yep, and I think this issue that we're talking about is that latter case. Like this is a test that we want to test for the Operator SDK scorecard command. This stuff is not operator type specific.
Yeah, I agree that we could, it's okay just in Go if it has no difference. If the custom test doesn't use any manifest, anything in the structure that can be changed for
honestly, I don't think it should even be in the Go EDE test. I think so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have some specific scorecard EDE tests that test various aspects of scorecard itself. That's where this should go. This should not be in Go, Helm, or Ansible EDE.
Yeah, I mean, if there isn't one, we should make one. It's the same thing as, go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, yes, I agree. And that it might just be, if we already have this test set up as part of the Go ETE, then we should move it to be run as part of the scorecard subcommand tests.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I don't want to spend too much more time on this because we have more to do.
Maybe we could get a volunteer to repurpose this issue for moving this test into a scorecard area.
Camilla, since this is your issue, can you follow up
Sure.
and just talk about what we decided?
Sure.
Also, quick side note, did somebody create that CI label recently? It looks like it was created in the last few weeks. Well, whoever did that, let's not be creating new labels unless we like really need one. I think it fragments the like whatever an issue is intended to be about, because the label might not actually be correct. So this isn't actually related to CI. This is a testing thing. We don't really have a specific testing label, so maybe we should create one for that, and combined with the appropriate language label, it will make sense, but let's not create labels willy-nilly.
Yeah, as a general rule, let's always discuss it here before we create a label.
Yeah, so I'm going to delete this CI label, and then we can talk about adding a testing label.
Okay, is that it for this issue?
I think it can be done after. It shows out of context, the label thing.
Okay.
Yeah, let's move on.
Implementing a watch for a CRD to trigger a reconcile loop for another CRD. So this seems like it's a how do I write an operator kind of question. Triggered watches for one SID changes.
This looks to me like just in 1.0, we scaffold projects using control runtime's builder pattern, and it's not quite as obvious how to set up this same sort of thing, but it's there. So we just need to document what the new mechanism for doing this is. I'm fairly certain there's a similar builder like watches function that has the same signature as the controller watch function that we use to scaffold. Does anyone else want to volunteer to find that and respond?
I can get this one. If nobody wish.
Sounds good.
Okay, assign yourself.
Did we decide what we're doing with backlog versus triaged? Because it's like a support thing, right?
Yeah, so for in triage support stuff like this, we'll still go into backlog as we've been doing, but then we'll be setting up a grooming meeting that will go through the backlog and deal with issues like this. If there hasn't been a response for a while, we're just going to leave it in the backlog and let either a response happen or the issue to be closed out. But we'll talk more about that at the first grooming meeting.
Could you please assign it to me for I don't forget?
We have a documentation label too, right?
Yeah. But I would use that if we're going to be adding documentation, not.
Yeah.
Oh, this is already documented. We just need a link. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's check it if it's required first.
Okay, anything else on this one? Memory leak.
Really quick on this one, Camilla, I remember answering this question once before. I can't remember if it was in a GitHub issue or not. So search and see if you can find an issue that's similar to this, and if so, you can just link to that other and close this as a duplicate. If not, then there's probably a Go doc that we can link to.
Okay.
Sorry, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
So I left my operator running and I saw the memory usage go up.
Okay, this one I put needs more information because we had in the past a problem with memory leak in Ansible, which was solved by using another dependence, another version of OpenShift dependence. This Ansible project that the user linked in the issue has the Docker file, a lot of customizations about the dependence. So it's not exactly the project that we scaffold. So it might be related the dependence used by him. And then I just link the solution of this issue and ask to him try, check if he could try to use the same dependence to see if it solves the problem.
What's interesting about that to me is Python OpenShift client is that should be on the Ansible base image. So it shouldn't even be in their operator.
It's possible that
yeah.
it is though, right? Like someone can install stuff right over what we've done. Camille, have you looked to see, like, have they given us an example of what their Docker file looks like, or are we just guessing?
I was just looking at it.
Yeah.
The base image is 1.0.
But he made a lot of changes go downstairs. He's updating the versions and the stuff, so in the Python. So I believe that it maybe is related. What we could do, is like one option that was in my mind was like create an Ansible project with just one API and put in an OpenShift cluster and let this stuff running for 1 week and to check if we can see if it has or not memory leak, without any customization. Then we can ensure that it is okay.
The other question we should ask here is the operator being reconciled during this time? Or is it doing reconciliations? Or is it just sitting there like totally doing nothing?
I think the reconciliation will occur anyway in each 10 hours by default, because the manager, retwig the controllers, they reconcile
True.
every 10 hours.
But if you look at that graph, it looks like it's not like it's a sawtooth where it goes up, or like a flat line where it goes up every 8 to 10 hours. And it looks like it kind of fluctuates up and down a little bit as well. So I am curious, maybe we can get some logs or something from it to see what kind of activity is going on, just as another data point. But regardless, I think from a triage perspective, this is something that we probably want to keep investigating and hopefully get more information from. So I think it's probably labeled correctly.
Should you, I don't know if it has someone that would like to volunteer to do this test, like create one project, putting an OpenShift or in Minikube, however, but measure the memory for 1 week and see if he's able to reproduce, without customizations, any customizations, just to ensure.
I think that's a good idea. I would probably just ask the person who reported this issue to try to reproduce it.
Geez, I believe that it was made. I did. Also, you are able to check the same scenario if a project that it has no customizations on it. So yes.
Oh, I literally just responded.
Yo.
Yeah, I don't think we're necessarily going to solve this here. I would probably say we've got needs more information. It seems like something we might want to assign if we're actually going to look at it. I don't know how we've been doing that, Jonathan and Eric. Like, will someone be looking at this if it's not assigned, or are we just going to wait until there's a triage meeting and
I don't think anybody's going to look at this unless it's assigned. What we could do is move this into a release milestone so that it has to be addressed even if it isn't assigned.
I feel like I would hesitate to put it in a release milestone if we haven't confirmed that there's actually anything for us to do. Maybe I would say, let's follow back up and ask if this person can reproduce with just, a base image and a role that does basically nothing, run it and tell us, does that have memory leak? If not, this is clearly something that was introduced by the changes made in the user's operator.
Can you assign this to me? I'll make sure that it gets addressed properly.
It is worth noting in the new comment that their OpenShift is the latest OpenShift release on the 0.10 line.
Yeah, so shows that he's using the dependency that he has the fix. So this should not happen. And it was requested already, so I think if we can do this again, but I believe that he doesn't want to do that. Maybe doesn't have time.
Yeah, I mean, in general, maybe this is too hardline, but I kind of feel like if I'm submitting an issue to another project and they ask me to reproduce it, that probably means that they don't know how, they can't figure out how it would be an issue. And it's kind of on the reporter to give a reproducer if they want it to be prioritized.
Yeah, and if they don't have time, if somebody else hits this in the future, we can collect information here.
But I think we're all good now. Eric's got this assigned, it's in the backlog, it has the right labels, so I think let's just move on.
Can have force anyway. Ask again.
We have a broken link to a migration guide.
This is a easy one. Has a pull request open for the user about it. In the 19, the tool shows the link for the migration guide, and the link is broke, so need fixing the codes.
Yeah, it's just in an error message, right?
Yeah, has the pull request already.
Okay, cool.
So do we need to assign this to?
I just asked
release
for
is
the
this going into?
fragment.
Is
I
this
didn't
going
hear
into
what
the
you said,
0,
Joe.
Is this going into the 019x branch?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I think we should just leave this issue alone. It should be fixed within the day, I would imagine. And if it's not, then we'll readdress it next issue triage.
This reminds me, do we want a milestone for 0.19.x or 0.19.4?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah. I wonder
I would
if we want to make milestones for the exact branch that we're targeting as our n-1, or if we want to make like an n-1 milestone. So it's always the same. But I guess that doesn't make as much sense because the issues might not map one-to-one between releases. So yeah, why don't we make a 0.19x milestone? That makes sense.
I think 0.19.4 makes more sense because 0.19x could be 4 or 5, which would be that's fine by me if we wanted to just that. But at that point, it's really more of a category and less of a milestone.
Yeah, and I would also say the worry that I would have is like, well, when are we going to stop making 0.19? Like, that's nice to have 0.19x because then you don't have to keep making milestones. But I think if we make it 0.19.4 and 0.19.5, then we have to keep making it. But that also is a signal to the community that we're going to keep making, like, we'll have another patch release for 0.19 until we decide not to. And then there won't be a milestone for that. And we'll make some announcement that says 0.19 is EOL. So I would also vote for 0.19.4.
Sure. I wouldn't even say that we need to make an announcement because our backport policy is pretty clear. And as soon as we release a new minor version, then we just stop making milestones for the previous one.
Well, we've stated because of the 1.0 feature and the huge set of
I see what you mean.
We've stated specifically for 0.19. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think adding new milestones is a power I have.
Go to issues.
Go to what?
Issues. The issues tab.
Oh,
milestones. Yeah, you might not be able to.
I'll make one real quick. All right, there's a 0.19.4 now.
okay. Anything else on this? I don't want
Wait, is that error message also present in 1.0? Camilla, do you know? Well, let me check real quick.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is that link in the error message also present in 1.0? I don't think it is.
No, because the documentation 1.0, no, it's not.
Oh yeah, it's the deprecation notice.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. We're good to go.
It's true.
Okay. I just closed this issue. So this person is asking, is there a way to do server-side filtering based on labels? And he linked the issue that is relevant because it's a strictly upstream issue. I just closed it as such.
Okay. Uh-oh. Some RSA vulnerability found in Helm operator Docker image 1.0.0.
As a side note, do we have a doc somewhere for how to handle security vulnerabilities? Like,
We
you
certainly
may
do.
not want GitHub issues open for those.
We have a security.md, which right now says to talk to Red Hat Security. I'm not sure if there's an equivalent for CNCF. Clearly, it shouldn't continue to be Red Hat, though.
Well, it doesn't. I don't know that it needs to be like a specific team. It could just be like an email that some of us are on.
And ideally, would have PGP or GPG or whatever encryption. That's what we have now. Just put it in the chat. Based on this security policy, if you go back to the issue, basically what it says is there's now a vulnerability in the base image of the Helm operator. When we built the operator, when we made that release, that base image, wasn't fixed. That base image has since been fixed. So I think what this is potentially asking us for is to rebuild using the new base image for an existing tagged release, which we've never done before. So we need to decide, A, do we want to start doing that? Or B, should we say, this will be fixed in the next release. We're going to do a 1.0.1, and this will be fixed, and you'll have your security fix.
That'll change the image SHA though, right? If we rebuild.
If we rebuilt, yes, it would change the image SHA.
So I'd rather not do that.
Yeah, I think my 2 cents would be that we put this in the 1.0.1 milestone, and it'll just get closed when we make the release. It looks like we need that milestone as well.
Making it. Made.
I think that was Joe. Do you want to drop a comment in this issue, just summarizing what you just said?
Sure.
Okay. Anything else on this one?
Do we want to create a follow-up issue to update our security.md to make sure the email is correct?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay. We probably don't even need to make an issue for that. You can just handle that. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, ET tests won't run locally. So this is my issue. And basically last week I was trying to test some ET test changes that Camilla was writing. And so I went to our docs and went to the page on how to run the ET test and followed the instructions there. And they don't work, like not even a little. So basically they say to set up a local Kubernetes deployment with like Minikube or Kind. And there's some stuff you have to do to like link your local Docker image registry to it so that the images are going to be able to be, pushed and then seen by the deployment. And that's all well and good. But apparently there's like some special magic sauce you have to know about to get these to run locally. And I was trying to run the Go end-to-end test. So this helpful warning isn't even in that one. So there's no way I would have ever known this unless I had, reason to look in this random file. Apparently there are these like 2 things you have to do if you're running locally. And if we uncomment these lines, it makes the test fail in CI, and we're not 100% certain why. This was very confusing because I never would have found this unless I think it was Joe told me to do this.
Jonathan, first, really thank you for the helping the review and try to test this stuff. I put a comment, the last comment, I put we have a doc actually that we have how to test the things locally that we could improve and update it. I also agree with Joe that we could have like a making file target that set up the things. But if you have the kind locally and the Kubernetes binaries will work.
I tried following the instructions in this doc for both Minikube and Kind and got the same error both times. And it wasn't until I followed Joe's suggestion and added these lines in that I actually got the tests to start running.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We really need to go back and kind of look at this from scratch almost. I think we've had like months and months of additive stuff without necessarily ensuring that we're updating the test doc to go with the test that we're adding and that kind of stuff. So Ish has, and he's here in this meeting, but he's got some work he's planning on doing that is going to go and look at this from a holistic perspective, and we're going to try to improve pretty much everything about what our makefile is doing, especially from the image building and test perspective. So this is, I actually pointed this issue out to him last week, and this will be like the primary focus for the initial set of things we want to do.
The doc is very outdated, that document. We need to update. It doesn't know if the targets is right. Yeah.
I think there's probably a little bit of debate we could have, which I don't want to have it now, but if anybody's interested, we could schedule another meeting. But there's two ways I think I could see this going. One is when you run the EDE test locally, we will always spin up an ephemeral, clean Kubernetes instance for you. Maybe we'll use Kind under the hood, and you have no choice. You are forced into that, but the benefit there is like, it's exactly what's going to happen in CI. So there's no chance of it passing locally and not passing in CI except for flakes. The other option is, which is kind of what we're doing now, but just not doing a good job of it clearly, would be we can kind of detect if there's an existing Kubernetes cluster set up, and if there is, then we'll just use it, and if there's not, then maybe we'll error out, or maybe only then will we set up Kind. There's a couple of ways this can go, but so far what we've been doing basically for the entire history of Operator SDK as a project is that we will honor the local environment and not set up a new environment to run the tests.
I prefer the second option because each one can use it, can change. But I believe that the biggest problem is the InvTest binaries that need to be in that place where he put the issue. Because the Kind is fine. We can just document that install Kind to run the test locally.
So just before we dive more deeply into this, I think it was mentioned that we have an enhancement proposal that is out or will soon be out that discusses this exact problem amongst others. So I believe this issue will be addressed in that, and maybe a better platform for discussing this is that enhancement.
Do you know where that will be or where it is?
I believe there was one in the enhancements repo, but that's not the right place for it. So it's going to be moved. Ish, are you on the call? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I was just listening. I guess needs a little more discussion on what to do next, but yeah, I guess you could assign this to me if it's not already.
Okay, great.
Yeah, the way that we can address for all users is one thing that I believe that can be part of the AP that she's working with. I'm just trying to explain to Jonathan why it is happening, how
Well, this
it
used to work.
works. Yeah.
So it's something we've done. I think when we started using Kind and setting that up, things kind of got mixed up between what happens on the Travis CI file versus what happens in the make file. And it's just not quite one-to-one working both in CI and locally. We just, the problem is like not very many contributors run the EDE test locally. So, you know, we'll make commits, we'll push PRs and everything passes in Travis. And we don't even realize that we've broken the test running locally. So I think we just need to be more cognizant. And this is something that frustrates me because I try to run the EDE test locally. And the reason that Jonathan found that and I was able to tell him like, oh, here's this hacky workaround is because I ran into the same problem a couple of weeks ago. And I thought I had some fix working and, you know, pushed it up to, and I thought like, oh, let me just, you know, add these two things that are commented out that Jonathan was showing, and that got it running locally, and I pushed it, and then everything just horribly failed in CI with like some error that was totally unclear and not at all related to the fact that I like, you know, basically set up the imp test tools. I was like, that can't have anything to do with it. It has to be something else. Nope, turns out that like using those two lines just totally throws off everything else in CI. So, yeah, we need to do a better job.
Contributors run the end-to-end tests locally, and I think that might be because, I mean, obviously situations like this, but they're very difficult to run locally, but also the base make test task in our make file runs
Doesn't do that.
It doesn't do a whole lot of anything. It doesn't even run the sanity tests. At least for me, that was kind of confusing. I would expect make test to run all the tests, more or less.
Definitely talk about that for sure. Yeah.
And before the previous version was like impossible running all the integration tests. For example, I use Mac, so I had a lot of problems with a lot of tests, you know, to run because the script work in Linux, but not in Mac because the Travis is using Linux. So
yeah, that, I mean, that I would say would be a bug too. Like it should work. Our EDE test should, or all of our tests should run just as well on Linux and Mac and just as well locally and in CI. If those things are not true, we should file bugs.
Now that we move for using the Go stack, it's easier, you know, I can work in the Mac, but before it was impossible run all tests.
Jonathan, can you, after this meeting is over, can you summarize what we just talked about on here? Basically saying tests need to be like effectively idempotent. They need to be able to run the same as in CI and locally, and make file target should be clear. Yeah, so this is definitely an issue to come back to when we are discussing the E2E enhancement.
Sure.
Thanks.
Anything else on this before we move on? Do we want to put this in a thing? A milestone?
I would say earliest 1.2.
Yeah, let's do 1.2.
So
needs discussion.
Okay, so yeah.
Is this an actual label?
It's an old one. you could probably just use that for now. We can talk about like an actual testing label that Prout can apply, or that Tide can apply later. Actually, I'm gonna put that on the monthly agenda doc.
Dynamically set namespace in Golang example.
So it looks like this person is trying to follow the conversion from cluster scope to namespace scope for their operator and not succeeding.
I think many users have been facing problems with that because before they could create the namespace and deploy the operator. Now, customize the project will scaffold a resource with the namespace, which will be created, a specific namespace. So many of them would like to, trying to change this namespace. Maybe we could explain how the things works in a documentation. Maybe in the
You're saying
fact.
they're conflating the operator namespace with watch namespaces.
No, like now, if he, okay, what is the step now? Now you go make a Docker build and put the name of the image, and it has a resource to create the namespace, which will be the project name, and the system will be the default namespace where the project will be deployed in. But they sometimes would like to deploy in another namespace, and things like that. It's not clear for them that the namespace is created now in the target by applying the manifest. Maybe in the fact, like how you change the namespace, the default namespace that the operator will be deployed, how customize it, something like that.
Okay, so maybe we need to update our doc, but it looks like this is a specific issue with roles versus cluster roles, and why that's not working, or why cluster roles are being used instead of roles. And I haven't actually followed this particular guide before, but there's probably something in there that says change role type from cluster role to role, and that's not being followed or is incorrect. Perhaps this person doesn't know how to use customize to the extent that they need to. Not really sure.
Which is kind of fair, to be honest, because customize is not super straightforward, and we're talking about in the Cube Builder community, we're talking about whether that's something we want to keep or whether there's something else we can do to make it a little more straightforward.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This would be in the operator scope on the sidebar to your left. There.
I think what we should probably suggest is someone who is familiar with customize and the scaffolding, trying to go through the process of converting to a namespace scoped operator and compare that with our documentation and see what the delta is.
Just one question about this one, because the folks say, I followed the instruction to set up the main cache operator, blah, blah, blah. I want to dynamic set the namespace operator scope. Okay, I catch you now. What you mean, because why you think that is the operator scope stuff, but I believe that he just want to change the namespace, don't be the default one,
I think what actually has to happen is, so at the end of the day, it sounds like we're trying to change the cluster role to a role, and the cluster role binding to a role binding, which means those two resources go from cluster scope resources to namespace scope resources, which means they have a namespace on them. And this user is confused about how to set to hard code, in his words, or basically how to set the markers. Yeah, at the very bottom where it says additional context. How am I setting the markers, the namespace field on the markers for these things to get it to do the right thing? And I think it's just, we set that to system. And if that propagates through to the files that get written in the RBAC directory, then Customize will correctly add the prefix, and that'll end up in the same namespace as the operator, and everything will work. So I think that's probably what we need to check.
You're talking about?
Yep.
He needs to do?
Yeah, effectively he needs to add a namespace equals some namespace string to their markers, and then run make generate.
Does that need to be system?
I'm not exactly sure how that prefixing would work, but I would imagine so. I can test this out and follow up on this issue, so assign it to me.
Need to be where the rule should be applied.
And then I think, Eric, a good point to make as well, unless I'm sure you're already thinking about this, but when we go to actually, if you're using OLM and you go to actually build this, like we're gonna ignore those namespace fields. So you'll be able to deploy your operator in any namespace if it's set up that way, and the namespace gets applied at operator deploy time rather than hard coded in your manifests.
Yeah,
that's only if you're using OLM.
Will do. And yeah, put this in the backlog, and also add triage support.
Okay. Anything else on this? Yeah, 5 minutes left. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about?
I've got something briefly. So we talked about last week in a Red Hat meeting that we thought we might be wanting to do a 1.1 release. And I just wanted to make it clear that we do intend to transfer that sort of responsibility to the community eventually. But so we basically couldn't do it yet just because we don't have the grooming meetings happening upstream yet. And so eventually that should be the way things work. But for right now, we are still planning to do a 1.1 release towards the end of the month. I can't remember the exact day. And we've got a lot of stuff in the 1.1 milestone that's still open. So we may be bumping some of that to 1.2. Is there any desire for the community meeting to go through all of that and decide what we do right now, or?
I think the plan is to cut that release and then start the week after that with the grooming meeting.
Cool. That works for me. I guess at the Red Hat people can just sort of take care of it this time and let the community drive the next one.
So for clarification, if you haven't seen the doodle poll, I believe we're shooting for the week of the 28th is when the first open grooming meeting should be.
Yeah, if we are attempting to release next week, then the following week should be the first grooming meeting.
And along the lines that Austin was just talking about in terms of giving the release permission to more members of the community and just the discussion and openness of it, Eric is starting to work on improving the release process and the automation and sort of thinking about these kind of things. So I don't think there's really anything yet, but Eric, I assume as soon as we have something written down for what we're thinking, we'll probably post that in as an enhancement somewhere, and we can send that out to the community for feedback and that kind of stuff too. So that's, hopefully this is good timing. We're trying to increase engagement at the same time that we're hopefully making it easier to engage.
Cool. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, I guess that's it for today. We'll see you all next week.
Sounds
Thanks.
good. See ya.
Thanks, Jonathan.